like cadenza-like sections, because I feel like, we can talk about technique, but I see you using TF. I definitely was not doing that in middle school, so um, I think that's all fine. I think we can bring a lot more out of this, and you're already doing so much, so it's really great to see. Where was that section where it kind of like
The cadenza?
yeah, yeah. What was that one section? Okay, let's talk about this. Do you have like, I'm sure Seaton and you have talked about this quite a bit. Do you have like a plan for what you're doing, like in terms of like, just like if you had to plot it out, like yeah. Have you sung it with him at all? Like,
Yeah.
just like a plan, like just in terms of like your how you're starting, what dynamics, what you're doing with the shapes. Do you have a plan? So what are you thinking about in terms of like these like just these sections here where it starts to get technique and technique? Are you going like slow and then faster, or it's all the same?
Here, start out loud, take crescendo. Here, crescendo through it, start out slow and then speed up here. Hold that at forte. Get a little bit louder as you're going there. And then here, as I go faster, take crescendo. Right here, get louder, speed up, and then slow down.
Okay, that's pretty good. Maybe we should. Can we go through it one time?
Yeah.
Just play how you hear it.
Yeah.
That's great. What do you feel about these accent marks here, here, and here? I feel like they're not. I mean, there's a phrase markings over everything, so I feel like they're not, articulation marks, but rather like points of interest that the composer wants you to highlight. So maybe think about it like just think about it in terms of like, you know, using that to structure how you're playing this, right?
Okay.
So let's just look at this first little thing here. Right, just really using it on the end. It's like whatever it is. So let's try. Let's just try experimenting with that and seeing what we can get out of that. Maybe you don't like that. Maybe you, because correct me if you're wrong, if I'm wrong, but the way I kind of heard you playing it was like. So maybe let's think about what those can mean in the context of this cadenza, because I think throughout this piece he uses them really as, body, downbeat, articulate hard. But here I think it's quite interesting how he uses it. So let's start there.
Okay.
Think about that and just see what you feel. Do you think which one is more important? Do you feel the F sharp or the G?
F sharp.
Why is that?
Because it's the starting one of this section.
I think that's part of it. I think another thing is that anytime there's a half step in music that indicates, tension, that can be explored. I think this is overall kind of, exploring like this thing. You see how it goes away here. So I think that we can really bring a lot out of these two notes. I don't know. I feel like this is probably more important, but I think that the resolution is probably what's more important.
Okay.
So highlighting that, maybe something like. So really emphasizing this F sharp, but then leading into the G. Can we try that? That's better. I think if you think about that throughout this piece, because this piece is very, very just like easy. I don't want to say like dopamine, but like just very easily like gratifying music. You can think about this throughout the piece. Anytime you can really give, push through a half step. Like here, it shows up, it shows up there, it shows up all over, and then there's this chromatic section. But let's go throughout the rest of this cadenza and think about these marks here again. So you're going technique, 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 and then you land on this F sharp. So how are you going like fast, 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 slow down, and then F sharp, or are you just hitting it?
It's speeding up this one. And
Okay.
Right there, it's for where I have it is that I want that to be.
be going through this again, and then these are just accenting into this final G.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think let's just try that. Give that another shot. That's great. I think we can bring more nuance still, though. I like this up until here. I liked all of that. But when you land on that F sharp, right? And this kind of has two phrase markings, but then it also has the overarching, like dotted one. Think about just when you learn on this, to do it like a little bit more time. Oh, I see. Just give it a little bit more time. So you're coming on. Something like that. Just to, I think you can just pull out so much emotion out of this and just give it a real climax. And are you having any spin to this? Any vibrato? No. I think that would be a nice addition. Because then you go right back into the character. Here, just try that section again. Just, yeah, right there. Sorry, right there. That's great. Let's try the whole thing one more time, just with all that in mind. Just the whole beginning. Better about this? I mean, I think something that's important when you're approaching something like this is having a clear plan. I'm really glad that you did. That's Seton rubbing off on you. And so that's a great thing. And I think let's just head back to the beginning, talk about some of this. Let's just talk about this. What do you feel? Is this like a cue?
Yeah, this is a cue for the piano.
Oh, I see. So it starts here. Yeah, okay. Are you doing the upper version?
Yeah.
Okay. What do you feel like when you're starting this piece? And I see you have written piano. Like, what do you think the most important thing to bring out is? I know you're doing a great job with the technique, and I think that like this is nothing we have to worry about right now. But I think something that's lacking is the overall like phrase structure that exists with this. Can we start at the beginning and like maybe start with this giant line? Yeah. That's great. So, again, great job with the technique. I think we can bring a lot more out of this just in terms of dynamic.
Okay.
So we start at piano, right?
Yeah.
And here we have marked forte.
Yeah.
So that's a huge contrast to be done in just 3 notes.
Yeah.
So if we're doing this, right? So just like, I mean, we're coming down, we're going from piano to forte in the space of a bar, and then coming down back to mezzo piano. So that's a huge just moment right here. Can we try that? Let's start at this piano,
Okay.
and let's keep that really low. Maybe even play it in quieter than you were, and really make an emphasis of this, and make sure the rearticulation of this A is important. crescendo's marked. So for me, that makes it feel like we've hit this climax moment, and now we're going back into this like noodly piano section. But I think something that I like that you did is that as this kept getting explored and explored, you like pushed through the lines and started crescendoing here into this D. I think we can make more of that.
Okay.
So let's say we start here where this new idea starts, and big breath here. Can you just make sure that each of these is like its own cell, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger until you hit the crescendo, right? So this starts off at a dynamic da 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 da, and then it just goes louder and louder until you hit this, and then you have to restart and hit this dolce section.
Okay.
Can we try that?
Starting from here.
Yeah, from here. Yeah, that's great. I think this was good, but then you drop this section here, and I think you can push through it. So so just like making sure that you don't drop out here. I think part of it is because you're going into this register that's a little bit more uncomfortable than it was previously, but you have to blow through this arpeggio so you hit this and can sustain and even increase your dynamic. Can we just try it again from here? That's way better. Let's start here now, and actually let's start back here and hit this, let's call it forte, and really make sure that there's a contrast where you're back to mezzo piano and bring out this wonderful character that he switches to here. Can we try that? Do you think that was a lot? How much quieter would you say you just hit that D? Do you think that was like a true mezzo piano? I think we could really bring it a lot quieter. Okay. Let's say we're hitting this at forte, right? We're going. Right, so we're really just like trying to change the character instantly, and the easiest way to accomplish that is to play quieter, I think, because I mean the legato aspect is still there, and the fast rhythms are gone, but but let's try it again, and let's make this forte, and let's make this just a really soft mezzo you can really show off the sound that you have, which is really, really great. One thing that you have marked in are these nice swell moments that I think you can do a lot with. If I start here, and we're thinking about mezzo piano. So I think one thing to think about is there's a rule of 3 in music, where the first time something happens, and you treat it like it, and then the second time it's even more, and the third time it's the most, right? So I think we can treat the swells like this. So the first time, we give it a little bit, and the second time we bring it out even more, and then the third time where we hit this final G, we can really make that like really powerful. I think another thing to think about with these crescendos is the note that you're trying to go to. So I think here we're trying to go to this E, here we're trying to go to this C, right, in terms to where the crescendo is going to, and here we're trying to head all the way to the end. I think this can kind of even be pushed back to this G. So let's like just move this one back 2 beats. Yeah. Can we start here and like let's start here. Okay. And let's keep all of that in mind. Just like making these shapes and like just kind of explaining to the audience what the composer is trying to put across. So let's try that. Let's start it there. that, but that's a good step in the right direction. Let's talk about this section here, the odd tempo. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this section is a little bit harder. We're kind of switching from more of like
it's harder.
yeah.
For sure.
One thing we can maybe talk about is like a few fingering things, though I leave TF marked in everywhere, I'm sure. He's talked to you about that. Maybe we can talk about these B flats, that little trouble. Are you familiar with like TA and this and those terms?
Yeah.
So what are you thinking about here? Are you doing like this?
Yeah, this.
Okay, I think something to explore when you're coming on and off of D is to use 1 and 5, which is something that people usually warn you not to do for the beginner B flat, but it can actually be ergonomically helpful, especially in situations like this, where all you have to do is, just switch from that. So, I don't know, maybe just try just specifically isolating these 3 notes. Just try that really quick. Do you feel, I feel like some, I don't know. I don't know, it's up to you, it's just an idea, but that's something that you can implement. And also coming off of F, that's also helpful, just for context. Do you want to maybe try this section again?
Yeah, can I try it a little bit slower, just to try to...
Yeah, for sure. Maybe, I don't know, do you want to start here?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and these are all just major arpeggios for the most part, so just working those out, I think you'll be fine. It sounds great so far. Maybe we should go to this section here right before the cadenza, and then we can finish out this piece. So it says finale. Is this like considered multi-movement? This guy. I think one thing that didn't really come across in your performance is like how the character change that happens here. And I think one thing that's a little bit new, that kind of it's borrowing from this legato section, is it's like heavier use of syncopation. So like this thing right here where it has this 16th note pickup and where that comes often through it. So maybe we can think about that a little bit more. Let's start at this forte. I'll stop you, probably around here somewhere, and we can talk about how we can bring out this character a little bit more. Great. I think one thing that's definitely different is the use of articulation here. This is like the first time that accent marks and staccatos really show up, and I think they're there very purposefully. So if we're starting like here, so I think we can make a lot out of all of these. So even after that. Right. Can we just try this section? Yeah, I think the accent is something I didn't figure out for a very long time. Just the fact that that you have to do something physically different when you approach this. And I think something that helped me a lot, and I was talking about this with Axel earlier, is just like the verbal thing that you're doing when you're approaching the instrument. That helps me visualize things a lot. So when I see this, I'm thinking like a hard do, you know? And really that engages your column and makes you push a lot more air, which I think achieves this sound. And for the staccato, it's a similar thing. I think for that, I'm gonna, that's more of like a dit, you know? So can we maybe just try saying dit, and just try playing the staccato. Do Do you hear how much space you're leaving there? Or not space, sorry, but how much length you're adding there? Yours kind of sounds like. But I want it to sound like. Yeah, that's way better. It's kind of like you're like pushing your tongue on the reed and then pushing it, pulling it off, and then putting it back really quick, and that like makes it. It's hard to kind of visualize, but it like makes this sound like be shorter when you reattach itself. So can you just try that a few more times? Yeah, and the important thing to note is to not get that like pulley sound that you're kind of like almost like a slap or something. And I think part of that is just like not doing like a downward motion with your tongue, but rather a lateral one, where you're going just up and like, if let's say this is the mouthpiece, this is your tongue, just like that's already better. I think just making sure that the length of that, like the shorter you can get it, the better. And now with these, getting that like burst of air behind it. Can you maybe try that? Just getting that. Yeah, that's perfect. So let's at least studios things for now.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's another thing to talk about is like the weight of tenuto. But let's try these, like starting here and really bringing out the staccato in these accent marks. That's leaning in a better direction. I think that bringing these out is going to be like helping you achieve this character thing that we were talking about. Another thing is, which I think you're doing well, is these shapes right here, these phrases where you're going, like I think the way that you're phrasing this is really good. Can we maybe just try that? And I think one thing that could improve it is the way you land on this note with the tenutos. So tenuto for me usually implies, and like he was saying earlier, implies based on the piece different things. I think in this scenario he wants it to wants it to imply more weight on the note, so you are going somewhere with this gesture, because this gesture isn't really that interesting on its own. Nobody's paying you to hear. What they want is like resolution, and I think so. Emphasizing the points of like where you come down is very important. So can we give that a shot, just starting from here, and maybe skip that and just go straight to here. Like just not have to do it in time, just do it in the visual. That's great. I think that's leaning in a better direction. That's awesome. Let's see. How about we start back at the end of this cadenza, and we'll go through this end, and I'll stop you again. Just like start right here. Awesome. So when you're starting this section, are you thinking immediately twice as fast?
No, not really.
Because the way I feel it, and this being a finale of like a show PC type thing, I think you can treat this as like a gradual cello that happens, and I think the majority of it can happen in these because it's the easiest.
Okay.
So when you start it, maybe you can choose to disagree with me. That's fine. When you're hard. So maybe. Just something like that, where you like start slow and then you take every opportunity to build and build and build, and then you hit the top and boom, you're done. Okay. Applause, standing ovation, out. So can we start here with that in mind? Awesome. talked about, and then do this to the end, and I think we'll be done.
Okay.
Okay, let's hear it.